Hey class, this is my final video. Give me an opportunity to illustrate that I don't really understand many of the principles that we went over this semester. So I'm just going to talk about what I took away from it, whether it's right or wrong. It's still sort of how I frame it and think about it. Um, from the beginning of this program, we've learned that the last 100 years in higher education has dramatically expanded. That's in part due to the rise of vocationalism, the GI Bill, the increase of lower tiered colleges, um, and simultaneously over that same time period, we've seen um, the expansion of academic freedom. See my group's excellent video from last week, but also a change in the relationship between universities and their students. I'm currently doing my culminating project on the benefits of viewing students as consumers. Essentially, I discuss a lot about the current generational trends of the current, what I call iGen generation, and how they view themselves as customers first and consumers. However, I didn't really discuss how today's students got that way. On the first reading of this semester, it's from In Loco Parentis to Consumerism, a legal analysis of the contractual relationship between institution and students. It discussed the decline of In Loco Parentis and the replacement with a more contractual system. This was a dramatic shift in the historical dynamic between the university and their students, and I think it's one that's taken for granted. On page 128 of the same document, he compares the student movement to some of the civil rights issues in the 1960s, or at the very least, he talks about how that was encouraged by the civil rights movements and how the Supreme Court began to apply the 14th Amendment clause of due process. So it seems to me that most of the progressivism in higher education, the decline of in loco parentis, the development of academic freedom, because that's the last thing on my mind, as well as many of the advancements for marginalized groups such, women, gay rights, minorities, disabled people, they all stem from the application of due process. And although I think that this is somewhat reactionary on behalf of higher education, um, we had a reading this semester called on the overview of higher educational law. Then on page 16, he stated, I'm just going to read it, colleges and universities have increased their commitment to and capabilities for risk management and preventive legal planning. So the same reading also states that the later half of the 20th century, um, changing circumstances worked a revolution between the relationship between academia and law. Changes in the composition of student bodies and faculties, and the growth in the numbers and diversities of programs that were being offered. In addition, with the expanded relationship with the private sector and the commercial entities, dramatically altered the legal landscape of higher education. Um, During this growth, this democratization, and the inclusion of anyone who, quite honestly, wants to go to college, I think of it in terms that there has to be a system in place to mediate the concerns, the legal issues, and the potential lawsuits of the expanded demographic in both faculty and staff. Even though each university may have their own system of instituting these practices, each one needs to be held to a standard of a universal system that applies constitutional right to due process. And I think that that is what's changed the landscape. As the student and the faculty are aware that there are inequities that are in higher education, you know, I think that because of the change in the legal landscape, it's reassuring that each person and each faculty member can attend a university, and knowing that there are legal mechanisms built into place to redress any potential concerns for their injustices that they may face. So when I entered this course, I guess I thought that it would be a bland overview of random social justice cases that are like hot button topics at the moment. However, The course came out of the gate discussing the increase of lawyers in student affairs and the increasing importance of law and legal recourse, which is something I've never really thought about. So I have to say that after this course now, that in my job, when I'm working with students, I think about each student's rights and due processes. And more or less, I also think about how their arguments and how their situation would hold up in court or hold up in a hearing. And in that way, I find myself better to recognize their individual rights and their specific circumstances, even if it doesn't apply to me. So I look forward to watching your videos. If you reply back to me, say nice things, and have a good rest of the semester and your program.